It's time to rip the cover off what really works to ditch addiction, depression, anger, anxiety, and all other kinds of human suffering. No, not sobriety. We're talking the F word here, freedom. We'll share straight from the trenches what we've learned from leaving our own addictions behind and coaching hundreds of others to do the same. And since it's such a heavy topic, we might as well have a good time while we're at it. Welcome back, guys. It's time to make you fearless today. We're going to talk about fear. This is awesome. There's an old story, and I love these old stories, and so I tell them a lot, and hopefully you're enjoying them. The swords master of the shogun, his name was Tajima no Kami. He was a very, very well-renowned samurai swordsman in kind of feudal Japan. And, there's a lot of stories that I've heard and read about him, Tajima no Kami. And he was the sword master of the shogun, right? People sought him out for specific training. And at one point in time, there was a soldier who felt he lacked an ability with the sword. He really wanted to learn. So he approached Tajima no Kami. And he came to him and he said, look, I've really wanted to learn the sword. I don't know anything about the sword. I'm not a master of combat at all. And I would really like you to teach me. And Tajima no Kami, he had developed over the years this incredible ability to perceive what was going on inside another person, to take minute cues and details from their posture, how they talked, how they held themselves, the energy that they carried themselves with, and to really read into their personality and what they were capable of. So he looks this man over and he says, okay, I'm willing to teach you, but first you have to admit to me that you're a master of. You're obviously a master of something. What is it that you're a master of? And the soldier's taken aback. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not a master of anything. Like, I don't know how to wield a sword. I don't really know how the best way to hold a sword. I mean, I guess I can guess, but I haven't trained in combat at all. I'm not a master of anything. And Tajima looks at him. He says, no, I've trained myself for years to really pick out people who have exceptional skill, because it's an important ability when you're dealing with swordsmen to know who has the skill and what you need to be aware of. And I can tell that you carry yourself like someone who is a master. And the man is like, oh, no. I mean, seriously, like, I have no idea why you're picking that up. I'm not a master of anything, I just perform my simple duties and I go about my day, but I'm no better than the people around me with any of this stuff. Tajima no Kami looks him over one more time and he says, look, don't lie to me. Don't pretend that you're something that you're not. Don't try and make light of what we're doing. I'm not going to teach you anything if you can't just level with me and tell me the truth about what it is that you've mastered. I'm willing to teach you, but if you're not going to be willing to tell me the truth, then that teaching isn't going to go very far, and I'm going to refuse to teach you. And at that point in time, the man is absolutely frustrated and at the same time worried. He's like, oh no, I must have said something wrong. I'm losing my chance to train with this amazing swordsman, and I don't even know what to say that's right. So he's just humbly kind of groveling, going, look, honestly, seriously, like, I can't think of anything. I mean, if I think about it, the only thing that I can think of is that some years ago I realized that I was afraid of death. And I realized that wasn't helping me in my life. And so I spent some time just coming to terms with the fact that death is what it is, and now I'm no longer afraid of it. And Tajima no Kami smiles, and he looks at him, and he says, I thought so. I knew you were a master of something. And also, because of that, and because you've mastered this fear of death, I have nothing to teach you. You see, when it comes to combat in life, we often get focused in on tactics. We get focused in on methods and strategies and procedures. This is the same if you're an entrepreneur or businessman. All the coaches out there, all the people that are telling you how to run business are going to talk to you about strategies and tactics and procedures. And while they are useful and important, the problem is that those strategies and tactics, they emerged from a certain quality. It wasn't that the quality was built or emerged from the tactics. And a lot of people try and go from the outside in when the important way is to go from the inside out. And yes, listen to them. But in business, they talk about strategies and tactics. In combat, almost every martial art on the planet is heavily focused, especially for beginners, on techniques. This is what you do if someone attacks you this way. This is what you do if someone attacks you this way. You step to the side, block, parry, strike to the ribs, and then from there you break the arm and twist to the left, and then take a sweep takedown and pin to the ground with the knee in the left shoulder. right? You're working on, if they come at you with a knife underneath, you're going to cross arm block, then you're going to slide one hand up to chop the neck, the other hand to control the wrist. You're going to headbutt them into the knee, and then you're going to use their own hand to stab them in the side of the back with their own knife so that there's no fingerprints on it. You're going to knee them here. You're going to knee them. All of this is tactics and techniques. And the problem with that is now you spend a ton of time. It's still good. You get it fit, you train some body and muscle memory, but you spend a ton of time memorizing things and training your mind to always have to sort through tactics and techniques. But that's not where masterful combat comes out of. Masterful combat comes out of a mastery of your own psyche and your capacity to perceive opportunity and instinctive reactions and guide those. It's a totally flip-sided, opposite way of approaching things that all of those techniques came out of. So much to the point that one of the teachers I trained with, Vladimir Vasiliev, at one point in time, Black Belt Magazine, they had him come in for a demonstration because obviously he's doing something amazing. I mean, the guy was a Russian operative for 10 years. He's the type of guy that they'd send him in to go do some work. And when he left the country, the entire political infrastructure would collapse. You know, they'd send him to Germany to collect the German spies and bring the German spies back to Russia so that they could interrogate him. I mean, his way of perceiving and acting and behaving around the world is absolutely incredible. And his teacher is stunning beyond belief, even more than that in some ways. Like, it's absolutely mind-boggling to see them in action. And so they brought him in and they're having him show simple escapes from holds. What do you do if someone grabs you in a choke from behind? What do you do here? What do you do there? And every time he was doing something different, and every time he would do like some amazing, unexpected thing, and the guy would crumple and whatnot, and the film crew would be like, wait, can you do that again? And Vladimir looked at him and he was like, no, I can't. No, I can't. That's probably not, doesn't sound like his voice, but whatever. It's my podcast. I can pretend to be Russian. and they're like, why can't you? Well, because he might be in a different place. Right? The details of it, he might be breathing differently. His weight might be slightly shifted onto a different foot. His arms might be held in a slightly different way. The tension in his body might be distributed differently. There might be other people around. Every new experience is its own unique thing. It's never happened before in reality. It's never happened since. And memorizing a technique for one event assumes that every time that someone attacks you that way, it will always show up the exact same way. When it never does, there are always minor variations and different things that happen that allow you massive opportunities. The skill and mastery of combat doesn't come from technique. It comes from awareness of yourself, awareness of the opponent, awareness of skills and abilities and tension patterns, awareness of what needs to happen, awareness of danger, and a fearlessness, a mastery of your own emotional state so that you can function at an optimal level with all that information. Okay. What about addiction? Oh man, a lot of the focus on getting rid of addiction is on these tactics. Let me put a filter on my thing. Let me have an accountability thing. Let me go an accountability buddy that I check in with all the time. Let me put a curfew on certain things. Let me have a flip phone so that I can't encounter those things. Let me drive a different way to work so I don't have to drive by that particular establishment over there. Let me have check-in conversations with my wife. It's a lot of tactics that are trying to control a situation, and those tactics, they work for people. They help people. I mean, you can put a person in a straitjacket and prevent them from doing a lot of stuff. But is that an optimal, fully lived life? No, that's not freedom. You're not fully alive. You're not fully free. And everything that I'm about is alive and free, right? So I'm not downplaying the fact that you can control a behavior that way. But the focus is so much on the tactics, just like that young soldier looking at Tajima no Kami, wanting to learn the tactics. How do I hold the sword? How do I do this? How do I do that? When Tajima no Kami declared him a master because he had mastered his fear of death. Think about it. If you enter a sword fight and you're not afraid of dying, but you see it for what it is, then all of a sudden, you're capable of functioning in a very different way, of taking appropriate action. And when we're dealing with pornography addiction particularly, there is a ton of fear around it. In the church that I grew up in, people will talk about it like, man, when you look at porn, you're like, it's a plague on mankind. You're going to ruin the rest of your life. And I get that some of you might not think that way. Some of you might. Go with the principle here, okay? Go with the principle. It's a plague on mankind. You're going to ruin your life and whatnot. So the first time I looked at porn, when I recognized that what I was looking at was porn, because I didn't even understand that at the time, but when I finally recognized it, my whole innards went kerploop. They just went, oh no, I've ruined my life, right? I've done this one thing that they told me would ruin my life, which means my life is ruined. And in the church I grew up in, that meant, okay, like there was denying the Holy Ghost was like the number one thing you could do. Second to that was murder. And below that was any kind of sexual impurity kind of sin. So I literally felt like I had just come that close to committing murder. Like I had done, oh dear, I looked at porn, therefore I've murdered somebody. Like almost, it's like I stabbed them, but they didn't die. And that's how I felt about it, which brought all kinds of guilt and shame and embarrassment and fear inside my life. And we don't need to bag on religious teachings. You don't need to have a religion to make somebody afraid of or shamed or guilty or embarrassed. So don't bag on religions for causing this. Parents and teachers of all kinds cause this because we want the best for people. And we think that our way of approaching it is great, but we never actually assess the way that the person we're teaching is internalizing it. That's where the real issue is. Because that's not the intent. The intent of a teaching around morality isn't to make people feel ashamed. It's to give them the possibility of experiencing life on a greater level. And so that's not the intent of it. But unless you're aware of how the other person's internalizing it, that's how it can show up. That's how it can act on them, right? So I had all this fear around it. And the people I talk to, they're afraid if pornography shows up on my screen, oh my gosh, if my husband looked at pornography, that means we can't be a happy family anymore, or we won't be able to live together into the eternities, or it means we'll never be able to have a deep, intimate relationship. It means the kids are going to grow up and they're going to turn into porn addicts and sex addicts. And it means that dad might be a pedophile. And there's a lot of fear around it. And, it's rewiring your brain and it's doing all this stuff. And now it's a sin. And there's the religious stuff on side of it. There's a lot of fear around it. And the problem with fear is that if you're afraid of something, it owns you. You don't own it. It doesn't matter if you're capable of killing it every time it shows up. If you're afraid of it, it owns you.
If you or someone you know is looking to drop the F-bomb of freedom in your life, whether that's from addiction or depression and anxiety or just anything that's making you feel flat out stuck, but you have no clue how to shake it and just want help doing it, head on over to liberateaman.com and book a call where we can look at your unique situation and give you the roadmap you've been missing.
So people told me, and I think I've told this story about one of my teachers with a knife, but they okay, go get a flip phone and whatnot. We're afraid of it, so we need to control our environment. There's nothing wrong with creating a powerful environment. Creation is important. We talked about that in the last episode, but nothing wrong with that. But what is important is if you're doing it out of fear, the effect is going to be very different, right? If you're doing it out of judgment and fear, the effect is going to be very different. If you're doing it out of creation, totally different experience in life. But if you're afraid of something and you don't know how to deal with it if it shows up, then it doesn't matter. It owns you. Might as well learn how to deal with it and see it for what it is so that you're no longer afraid of it. Even in Christian circles and religious circles, they'll say God isn't a God of fear. And if you're meant to be godlike, that means you need to overcome your fear of things. You're not there to sit there and be afraid of pornography. Because if you're afraid of it, then when it shows up, fear enters your body. The chemistry of fear floods through your system. Your heart races and whatnot. And your body goes into a survival mechanism, which shuts down higher level thinking and better decision making and makes it so that you do not function at your highest level. You function only for optimally for survival, meaning get out of this scrape here now, and that's it. But that is not you operating at your highest level. So if you think being afraid of something, oh, I have a healthy fear of something. If you think fear is healthy, then you don't understand how fear actually functions inside of the body. And you don't understand what it's doing to you. The best thing to do is to go in, and I'm not talking about mortal danger fear, like someone pulls a knife and your body senses it. That fear can be empowering because it's information that you can do something with. I'm talking about the fear that comes after that, where your mind's like, oh crap, he's gonna I'm gonna die. That's all made up. That's not inherent in the situation. And that's causing you struggle. You'll freeze, you'll get stabbed, all kinds of stuff. Only here, the proverbial knife is not a real knife, it's pornography, right? When that gets pulled out into your circumstances and you go, oh no, now I'm a sinner. No, my wife's gonna find out, and all that other stuff, that is not gonna help you function at your highest level. And most people, when they have an urge or a desire, it shows up and they're so, oh no, it's here and now it's inevitable. It's going to happen. That's all created by them in their mind. They're owned by their own fear And eventually it happens and the behavior owns them. Their urge to whatever it is, whether it's just to eat and binge eat, whether it's porn, whether it's drugs and alcohol, whether it's yelling at their kids, whether it's whatever it is, like that fear of it is the very thing that's making it show up in your life. So what do? You do what the soldier did. You have to master your fear of the thing. Bob, come on. How do I master my fear of pornography? I've seen what it does to marriages. I've seen what it does to relationships. I've seen what it does to parents. I've seen the sex trafficking and the human trafficking trade. I've seen the devastation that's come. I've seen the Fight the New Drug website. I've seen all of the mental and cerebral and neurological rewiring that happens that makes a person revert to more childish sort of behaviors. I've seen all this stuff. Why shouldn't I be afraid of it? How do I get rid of a fear of that? Good question. What is fear, right? What is fear? Fear is an experience that you're creating by the way you piece together the material. We talked about this in the memory episode. It's an experience you're creating. So to master the fear is to simply not create the experience the same way. You can have all the same data, but you don't put it together in a way that says, this is more powerful than me. You see, when you're afraid of something, it's often because you're afraid that it's more powerful than you and it will rob you ultimately of life or thriving. This all comes down to survival, right? Life. I mean, you boil it all down. Fear is a result of you believing you're going to die in one way, shape, or form. Your ego's going to die. Your good name's going to die. You'll lose all your money, and that's death. You'll lose your life, and that's death. Fear comes down in minor and major ways down to some part of you, some part of your life it might suffer death. And if you look at pornography and have the belief that if that shows up on your computer screen or you drive by a billboard or something, and that has the power of life and death over you, then you will create fear inside of yourself and you will cease to function around it very, very optimally. You'll have to justify your behavior. You'll do a lot of other things to try and make up for it, all kinds of stuff. What you need to do instead is look closely at whether or not that has the power of life and death over you. Pornography for most people is literally flicking lights on a screen made of glass and metal and some other stuff. It's literally light. It's all it is. And all the rest of that is a fantasy created in your head. It's literally light. Does light from an LED screen or light from a computer screen have the power of life or death over you? Does it? Look at it clearly. If it's a magazine page, does a piece of paper with ink on it actually have the power of life or death over you? Can it ruin your life, right? Do thoughts in your head, do they have the power to ruin your life? Only if you actually treat them that way. All of the places that you might find and experience pornography in the world, or whatever else it is that you're afraid of, does it actually have the power of life or death? Now, if we're talking about self-defense situations, that's a whole different topic. Maybe you should just come and train with me and we can talk about all the different nuances in there. But we're talking about pornography here. To overcome the fear of it, you have to see it for what it is. Yes, if you entertain it in a certain way in your mind, it will create other possibilities and neural rewirings, and it'll make you start to behave around people in a certain way and start to crave certain things and have emotional responses and whatnot. It'll do that, for sure, meaning you will do that with it. But you are the one that is creating that possibility out of pornography. Pornography itself isn't doing that. You are the one that's creating the pleasure out of it. You're the one that's creating the pain out of it. You're the one that's creating the guilt out of it. You're the one that's creating the shame out of it. And understanding that simple thing allows you to put the power back where it really lives, which is inside of you. You're the one with the power of life and death over your own experience to a certain extent, right? It's not pornography that's doing that to you. It's you doing it, using pornography as a means of doing that to yourself. And when you start to see that, and you see all the benefits that you're using it to bring to yourself, and all the detriments that you're using pornography to bring into your life, and you see it for both sides, the good and the evil, but that you're the one that's making all of that out of it, that you're the creator, you can celebrate how masterful you are at your creation. Wow, I'm amazing at suffering. I'm amazing at messing up. I'm good. You can celebrate that, but you can also, you can celebrate the fact that you have the capacity to, am I still interested in creating this? Or would I like to create something new and different? And this is where choice shows up. And now it's no longer about a choice out of fear. It's a choice out of creation. And that is always the best place to live from.
And that's it for today's Alive and Free podcast. If you enjoyed this show and want some more freedom bombs landing in your earbuds, subscribe right now at wherever you get your podcasts from. And while you're at it, give us a rating and a review. It'll help us keep delivering great stuff to you. Plus, it's just nice to be nice.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.